All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're moving fast because we are decoding the hidden neurobiological reasons why some of the absolute brightest minds out there hit a massive, seemingly unbreakable wall of burnout in adulthood. We're looking right under the hood at the psychology of the former gifted child. We're going to investigate why the environment you grew up in might be the exact reason your brain is wired the way it is today, and honestly, why you might be struggling so hard just to find a little peace.
So let me ask you this. Were you always told you were so mature for your age growing up? Did adults constantly praise you for being the easy one? You know, the smart kid, the one they literally never had to worry about? Well, if that hits home, take a look at where you are right now. Do you find yourself practically paralyzed by the fear of making a mistake or failing as an adult?
It's a wildly heavy feeling, right? Experiencing this kind of psychological whiplash. On one hand, you've got the kid with endless potential. The sky was absolutely the limit. But on the other hand, you've got the adult who feels like they are perpetually running out of time. You might be walking around completely exhausted, feeling totally drained to your core, while simultaneously feeling like you're accomplishing absolutely nothing of value.
But here's what psychology actually says about that. You aren't lazy. I really need to make that crystal clear right out of the gate. This isn't happening because you somehow lost your spark or your talent, and it definitely isn't a character flaw. It's actually the long-term result of how your brain and your nervous system adapted to carrying way too much pressure way too early in your developmental window.
Okay, let's dive into the first real root cause of this, the parentification trap, and how you essentially outgrew your childhood. To truly understand why you quietly outgrew your childhood years, we've got to look at parentification. And look, this is not just about being smart or, doing some extra chores around the house. It's about a child being expected to handle adult-level cognitive complexity. Things like mediating your parents' arguments or absorbing your family's emotional baggage long before you were actually developmentally ready to process any of it. You realized super early on that somebody had to be the responsible one, and while it made you look incredibly capable to everyone else, internally, it taught your developing brain a pretty dangerous lesson, that your own feelings and needs must always come last.
Which leads us directly into our second major concept, survival independence, or early self-reliance. That early pressure totally rewires how a developing brain handles relationships. When emotional support feels shaky or inconsistent to a kid, the brain steps up to protect itself by developing what we call survival independence. You basically just stop asking for help. You stop expecting comfort. And why? Well, because your brain learned the harsh reality that being ignored often happens very quietly, and relying on other people is a vulnerability that almost always leads to disappointment.
So today, as a full-grown adult, you probably look completely put together. You handle absolutely everything on your own, you're the rock for your friends and family. But deep down inside, you struggle immensely to trust support because it just feels so foreign. It's not that you hate getting help, it's that you fundamentally do not trust it to stick around. Any help you get feels like a temporary luxury that is bound to be pulled out from under you.
Now, let's look at how all this affects your day-to-day life with something called uneasy rest and split maturity.
How exactly does this early wiring manifest on, say, a random Tuesday evening when you're just trying to chill out on the couch? Well, it creates uneasy rest. Tell me if this sounds familiar. The absolute second you sit down to relax, you feel this immediate, almost physical surge of guilt or anxiety. That happens because your nervous system literally associates a state of calm with danger. It's desperately signaling that if you aren't on high alert, something is going to go terribly wrong. You've been wired to only feel safe when you are actively being productive.
And that triggers this incredibly frustrating four-step neurological loop. Step 1, you try to get some rest. Step 2, boom, the guilt hits you like a truck. Step 3, to cope with that guilt, your brain starts dreaming huge. You imagine this perfectly successful future, which actually gives you a really satisfying hit of dopamine. But then comes step 4. You avoid taking any actual risk. You end up completely stuck in this loop of dreaming big, but doing absolutely nothing. You'll plan out a 10-year empire in your head, but panic at the thought of sending one slightly risky email. Your brain is basically protecting its own self-image, because as long as you stay in the planning phase, your dream remains flawless, and you never have to face the sting of real failure.
The end result of all these hidden adaptations is a state of split maturity. Outwardly, you project this incredibly wise, responsible, capable persona. You're the person everybody else runs to for advice, but inwardly, it's a completely different story.
Inside, you feel the swirling storm of confusion. You feel directionless or deeply emotionally unfulfilled. And that's simply because your most fundamental early needs for safety and care were entirely suppressed.
You might even catch yourself doing a couple of very specific things that act as symptoms of an overactive analytical mind. First is verbal reasoning, basically constantly talking to yourself out loud just to manage the sheer volume of thoughts bouncing around in your head. And second is intellectual humility. You genuinely doubt your own brilliance. You experience massive imposter syndrome for the exact reason that you are self-aware enough to realize just how much you still don't know.
Now, if the concepts in this explainer are hitting a little too close to home right now, I really want you to just take a breath. Listen to me. You are not broken. None of this means there is something fundamentally wrong with your brain or who you are. You are simply operating on some seriously outdated survival software.
So let's pivot away from the problem and talk about healing your nervous system by actually teaching it safety. This is where we drop the self-blame and step into genuine recovery. Think about this for a second. Your nervous system learned responsibility before it ever learned safety. You learned how to be strong way before you were allowed to be soft. You were essentially forced to build a fortress before you ever got the chance to just be a kid. So healing does not mean going out and finding some new life hack to become even more productive. True healing is about finally teaching your nervous system that the threat is over. Because once you see these neurological and psychological patterns that shaped you, you really can't unsee them. The exact same adaptations that kept you safe as a child are the very walls holding you back right now as an adult. So here is the question you have to ask yourself. Now that you actually understand the mechanics of your own mind, are you going to stop blaming yourself? Will you start living for you? And most importantly, will you finally allow yourself to rest?